Welcome to the Whiskey and Wisdom Podcast, coming to you from the Cargo District Recording Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we discuss the most fascinating topics of life. I'm Tyler Yaw with my co-host, Chris Kellum, and each week we interview a special guest to learn how they acquired their wisdom over a glass of whiskey. So, sit back, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy Whiskey and Wisdom.
Hey, you guys, welcome back. This week, it's your boy Chris and
Tyler.
And we brought on
Anthony Tubbs. I'm from Pennsylvania, currently living here in Wilmington, working for True Blue. So I'm their beverage specialist and front of house operations manager, and kind of came in contact with these guys through one of our co-friends, mutual friends. Yeah. And I'm excited to be here and talk about some whiskey with you guys.
And you brought on some Scotch as well for us to try.
Yeah, I did. So I studied in Edinburgh, Scotland at the Edenborough Whiskey Academy. So I'm certified in Scotch and gin distillation.
Oh, wow.
So obviously Scotch is my bread and butter, specifically Islay Scotches. I mean, that's what I love to drink all the time. If I'm having a night pour, that's what I go with.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring a limited edition Lagavulin for you guys, which is their 12-year special release. It's a European special release. And then I also brought one of my favorite distilleries, Ardbeg. I brought their Black Sheep, which is a committee 2020 release. So That's a huge thing because it's also a COVID thing. You know?
Yeah,
so that was a big deal for him. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, we greatly appreciate you bringing these on too, because we haven't really ventured into Scotches just in general, let alone something that actually came from Scotland.
Yeah, I was thinking, I'm like, I know we've done some Irish whiskeys. That's about it.
Yeah, we haven't really ventured into
Scotch over there.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I won't be leaving these here with you guys.
It's okay.
Those are coming back to my house.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it because it has so much the scent to it. Because I'm always like a scent person. It's very smooth and doesn't like burn your nose like some things. But when you sip it, there's so much flavor.
Yeah. Well, that comes down to distillation itself. With a lot of cheaper, lower end whiskeys that you have, when you smell that strong scent, when you sip it and it burns really hard down your throat, that's because of the ethanol in the whiskey itself, and that usually comes from like a continuous still, which is what a lot of major distilleries use nowadays. A lot of Kentucky bourbon distilleries use continuous stills, which is just a faster way of distilling the alcohol. It does it a lot quicker.
Right.
It produces a lot more. Where in Scotland, like I was saying to you guys earlier, they're very specific on how they actually make their stuff. So they only use pot stills over there, which a pot still is basically, can't really think of the fun way to say it, but it really spends time making quality distillation from it. The fumes that come from it afterwards is collected in a lot more of a smoother way. It's not just meant to pump out a buttload of gallons of whiskey.
Yeah.
It's very specific. There's a lot of labor and love put behind what Scotch distillers do.
So you can definitely taste the peatiness in this one too. And for people that don't know, like I didn't a couple months ago, it's more of like a smoky type of feel and taste to it. Is that the proper way of?
Yeah, absolutely. So what that term is actually called is peat reek. That's the smell that you're getting there is peat reek. What peat is actually decaying plant matter. So literally it's basically a field of grass.
Okay.
And then if you've ever seen like in Lowe's or Home Depot in the gardening section, there's like that tool that you can push in the ground and it pulls up like a cylinder of dirt, or like golf courses use it to make a new hole on the green.
Yeah.
Right. So they basically have a big one of those and they just go out into this peat field and they just chunk up big pieces of decaying plant matter. And at first it's just dirt, and then they let it dry out and they let it dry in these like cylinder forms. And then that basically becomes kind of like timber. And then what they do after that, because it can't catch on fire, it smokes an incredible amount. It's basically like catching a pile of wet leaves on fire. Like it's not going to actually catch on fire, but it's going to cause a lot of smoke. So that's what they do to create that peat reek. And specifically in Scotland, they do that in malting warehouses. So the very beginning process of barley, which is malting the barley, they'll use that smoking of the peat to help with the malting process kicking off. So there's literally like companies that just do that all day long. and then they sell it to smaller distilleries, and then, your bigger ones like Lagavulin and Ardbeg, Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich, all of them, they have their own warehouse. They're big enough at this point. They've been open long enough that they do it all themselves, which that is wicked cool in my opinion.
Yeah. So is that something that's more so specific for Scotch? Is that peat reek, or not all Scotches have that?
So not all Scotches have that. Almost all barley has to be malted to start, but not all barley is malted by smoking peat. For instance, like Glenmorangie is one of my other favorite Scotches. They don't have a big peat to it at all, actually. Okay. A lot of their stuff actually tastes very similar to like American whiskeys to me. It's really like an orange citrus to it. It's a lot sweeter. Like I really catch no smokiness from a Glenmorangie bottle, specifically like the La Santa edition, which I believe that one's aged in a sherry cask, or it's a port, either or. Yeah. Like that really is just extremely smooth. If someone says they don't like Scotch, I grab that bottle for them to try. Yeah. Because that's very similar to the smoothness of a bourbon that we know because of the corn. So that's like my go-to to someone who's like, I don't like Scotch. I'm like, well, you just haven't had the right one yet. Like everyone likes it.
So with Scotch too, so I know it has to come from Scotland. So what other standards need to be in place for to be considered a Scotch?
So the biggest thing is that it has to come from Scotland, right? And first off, in Scotland, they don't call it Scotch, they call it whiskey.
Oh,
yeah. If you call it Scotch, they're like, hey, give it the finger, give it the bird. They don't like that. So they just call it whiskey over there. You do have to age it for a minimum of 4 years, just like, with bourbon, there's a minimum of aging in an oak cask as well, a new charred oak cask. But other than that, it really comes down to the process of distillation and the whole process that they go through, making sure everything is from Scotland, organic, natural, bottled, distilled there, sold there, so like, anywhere else in the world can't call it a Scotch, obviously. But that's the biggest thing, is that it has to come from Scotland. Okay. But what's cool is a lot of people are taking on Scottish ways of distillation. So, for instance, here in North Carolina, there's a distillery called Defiant. I don't know if you guys have heard of them.
Heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, but
I haven't been there yet.
What's that?
I have not been there yet.
No, but have you tried their stuff yet?
No. Yes, I have, actually.
Okay. Yeah, wicked good. Yeah. They have a malt whiskey as well, right? Literally same exact process as a Scotch.
Oh, wow.
And it is absolutely delicious. I mean, you guys probably have heard of Stranahan's out in Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're a single malt whiskey as well, so they kind of do the same process. So we can have Scotch whiskeys here in America, we just can't call it a Scotch, but we can make it taste exactly the same way. A huge company that's actually winning awards and won number one malt whiskey in the world, I think like 2 years ago, is Balcones, which is in Texas.
Yeah.
Their whiskey beat out Scotch whiskeys, for malt. I was like, all right, go Texas, like that was pretty cool, but the story behind them, they started off as a small little group and ended up buying like this massive abandoned train construction warehouse, I don't know, something like that, and turned it into this glorifying fortress of a distillery in Texas, the Texas way.
Yeah, of course.
Go big or go home, I guess, right? But the head distiller there, man, I mean, he's just brilliant. And he also is in love with Scotch whiskey. He studied in Scotland as well, I'm pretty sure. And, that's where his kind of inspiration came from. So, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty neat to be able to say that an American whiskey won that. You know?
Exactly. Well, I want to take it back a little bit first too. So what got you into the love of Scotch and whiskey?
Yeah. So it actually started after college, right after I got out of college. It was because, when I left college, I'll be honest, I didn't actually finish school, right? Because I started working at the Rebellion when I was a young kid in high school. I started out as a dishwasher, went to serving, et cetera, et cetera. And then I left and went to college, and the owner actually reached out to me my sophomore year and was like, hey, I need some help here. You willing to come back and be a bar manager for me? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to do it. I was going for hospitality anyways. I went to Penn State University. Yeah. And in this industry, schooling's great, but in my opinion, personal experience and actually being there is more important in this industry.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I started bartending there and kind of being the beverage manager, and being honest, I knew that most people aren't going to come in to flirt with me to help me get some money. So I knew being at the whiskey bar, the most important thing was my knowledge.
Right.
I knew that I had to impress everyone that came in with being a good bartender and be very knowledgeable about my stuff.
Yeah.
So at first, it was really just kind of for shits and giggles, just to make sure I knew some things. But the further I read into all the bottles, I really fell in love with it. And not really the whiskey, but I fell in love with the history of it.
Right.
Each distillery has a story to it, and you can say that about wine. You can say it about a brewery, any company really. But, this is what stuck out to me, right? So I just fell in love with that. A lot of Scottish distilleries are 300 years old. The oldest one is Bushmills. They're coming up on 400 years old. You know what I mean?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, man. It's wicked. Old Bushmills was the very first distillery to get licensed in the late 1600s. That distillery is still there today. They don't really use it anymore. It's more for the fun touristy things to go see.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's just Bushmills instead of old Bushmills. But so yeah, I fell in love with the stories behind it because my dream one day is, I want to own my own distillery.
Yeah.
I would love to start something that in 100, 200 years from now, my family still owns, and is worldwide famous because a lot of these distilleries are still family owned. You know what I mean? The person who owns it now never met the guy who opened it, didn't meet his great-great-great-grandfather, but it's still in the family. And to me, family is the most important thing. And I think that's an incredible way to celebrate that.
Yeah, that's one way to cement a legacy right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah. That's cool. We're drinking the guy's whiskey right now. You know what I mean? So
some good stuff.
So where in the process from getting started at the Rebellion up there in PA to going to Scotland to learn more about whiskey?
Yeah, so that actually happened because we started gaining a lot of popularity in the bar. We started winning awards. We became #1 restaurant out of 200.
Wow.
And this actually all happened. I was only beverage manager there for maybe half a year. And then our restaurant manager got in a fight with the owner. So he got kicked out, and then I just kind of walked right into that restaurant management position. I took ownership of it.
Yeah.
And then ever since I did, like I said, we started winning awards, became #1 restaurant in our county. And then a year later, we were awarded #1 whiskey bar in central Pennsylvania, which was a huge deal.
Yeah.
I started getting magazines written about me because I was doing craft cocktails. I made our bar all natural. There was nothing artificially flavored. I have nothing against Screwball, right?
Yeah.
Great peanut butter whiskey. But you'd have to kill me to put that in that bar.
Right.
You know what I mean? I made that 100% natural bar. We were an all craft bar, which was very important to me. As far as bartending goes. I could never be your dive bartender down at the Husk, until 3 a.m. I could never do that. But if you want me to be make you a really nice cocktail, might take me 5 minutes to make it because there's a lot in it, but I give you that experience. That's what I always loved. And that's what we did there. And that's what kind of started kicking us off. So anyways, after that, it came to our attention that hey, I know a lot, but I don't know enough.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of where it started. And then obviously I started studying with Edenborough Whiskey Academy. And that took about 3 months, back and forth, et cetera, because it's still running a restaurant. But afterwards, I was able to get my certification in Scotch and gin distillation. So I'm considered to be a master in that.
Wow.
So if there is any distilleries out there looking for an apprentice, I'm open to ears, just saying. But yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where that started off and went towards. That was a great experience for me. I got to learn a lot about the thing that I love, kind of start the process of that. And then what helped me also is there's a distillery up north that our restaurant was partnered with called Big Spring Spirits. They're one of 3 distilleries in the world that's Gold Lead certified, meaning that they're leaders in environmental and energy design. And I started kind of working with the owner there a little bit, as well as working with the Rebellion. I just sold their products for them. I would help at the distillery a little bit.
Yeah.
That was an awesome experience for me. But that's where it kind of started. And ever since then, I came back and I would just spread my knowledge. And what was awesome about that is I actually, in 2020 during COVID, I was selected as one of the top 30 youngest business professionals in the entire state of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Which was a huge deal. That was by PA Business, right? So that was really awesome for me. I was the only one that was a restaurateur. Everyone else was like a banker or, one of them was like a lawyer and some of them were like real estate agents. I was the only one in the restaurant industry, which I was like, I tapped myself on the back.
Exactly.
For sure. That was a huge deal for me.
Definitely something to be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what brought you down here? I'm assuming it was because you had a lot of accolades and someone was like, yo, let's get this guy away from the cold.
No, so if I'm being honest, I was actually in a really serious committed relationship up north and things kind of just went south, and a lot of things weren't making me happy anymore. Yeah. I was at that restaurant for a very long time. I loved it. I have so much to be thankful for from that restaurant, but I knew it was time already. And I was already thinking that. And then after everything that happened in my personal life, I was like, screw it. It's time for me to leave. It's time for me to go do something else. And my best friend of 17 plus years moved down here about a year ago. And I visited him a bunch of times. Shout out Kellum. And he was like, all right, I'll start looking for a place for you. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And literally within a month of my decision, I moved on down here. I gave the last restaurant enough notice, what I mean? Because I think that's respectful. I had certainly to do that, of course. So I gave them enough notice, and it literally worked out like beautifully. I found a gorgeous apartment, got it the day of, right downtown. So I live in the historic district downtown, which is beautiful, 2-story loft apartment. Couldn't have gotten luckier. And then at first I started working for Urban Food Group in town here. Yep. I'm not going to say much about them. Right? I'm just going to leave that at that. And I'm very lucky that Bobby Zimmerman from True Blue and their service director, George, awesome French guy, right? Love this guy. I'm very lucky that, we already kind of knew each other from just the industry in the area. And they reached out to me after a little bit and they were like, hey, we have this job opportunity for you. And I hopped on that quicker than you could imagine. I was like, this is a company I want to work for. So I'm very blessed that now I work for True Blue. They're an awesome company. Bobby Zimmerman's doing great things in town. He's got a bunch of things opening up. And the restaurants he does have care about quality, and that was really important for me. That's actually what was the key factor for me, is quality, which is really important. So, and then now I'm here, absolutely.
So are you bringing some of the more an all-natural product thing to True Blue as well, too? Is that something that you're going to keep on going with the cocktails?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's something we're doing. A lot of our cocktails are not now like craft cocktails. I'm trying to bring that artificial stuff. I make the shrubs. I'm making bitters, tinctures, all of that. So I really believe in that. I'm not making our cranberry juice. You know what I mean? That's a little excessive. I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. But, other than that, any like fancy juices we're doing, we try to make it. The main bartender down at Barrel, he's awesome. His name is Michael Party. Okay. He does a great job with that too. He's very involved in it and wants to do the same thing, so that's huge. And then the bartenders at table, every single one of them are lovers of craft cocktails. Which that's just an awesome environment to be around. If you're into that stuff and you have other people surrounding you, your ideas don't sound stupid. They're like, I actually love this idea, let's do it. And that's really important for someone running a bar program, right, is that the bartenders are on board with that. Right. So that's super helpful. And, every restaurant kind of does that. Mariposa, which is that Spanish tapas bar, authentic, their bar program is a lot smaller, but they're a lot more intimate of a restaurant, so like they don't do crazy things there with it, but everything is quality still. Like I said, during the wintertime when there's no patio, it's maybe a 20-seat restaurant. So it's very, very intimate. Oh, for sure. So we don't need 20 cocktails that are
true,
super high end. You just need one or two that's really good. And then you got to have good food and good company, and then you're set.
What's your favorite type of cocktail to make?
So that's a tricky one. Most people would think that I like a whiskey cocktail, but I'm actually a Negroni fan.
Really?
Yeah, I love my gin. I really do. That's something that's actually happened in the past year. I learned about it when I was over there, and I learned how to make it. Yeah. But I still was like, screw gin. I was like, I'm a whiskey drinker. I'm a man. But then I started drinking more and more gin, and, it's a euphoric alcohol. Like every alcohol every ingredient, those botanicals, they bring out euphoria in you. you know, and that's why I love gin, because that's a happy alcohol to drink. You know what I mean? Everyone has their thing. You know, some people are like, oh, vodka, I'll get in a fight at the bar. You know, or tequila, I'll be dancing on the bar. You know, for gin, for me, it's just like I'm having a great time. You know, and a Negroni just hits all the marks for me. The sweet vermouth and then the Campari in it. Like, it's a very simple, basic drink, you know, but I'm not a complicated man. You know what I mean? I like the easy classics. So Negroni is my number one go-to.
So is Scotland known for its gin as well too then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would say Ireland's more huge on that. Ireland or, you know, like England. Okay. They're more on their gin wave than Scotland is, but it's really a United Kingdom thing that a lot of good gins come from there. I mean, one of my favorite is Gunpowder Gin, which is an Irish gin. Okay. You know, I mean, that's really, really good. It's got a lot of flavor to it, because what's cool about gin is the only common factor is juniper berries in it. Other than that, it's kind of up to the distiller's discretion on what botanicals they put in it. And botanicals are just rosemary, thyme, you know, sage, any herb that you want to throw in there, you know, so it's up to them. So gin can be vastly different. You know, you can have one that tastes like oranges, and then you can have one that tastes like, I don't know, freaking flowers or something like that. You know, like, it's totally different. So
that's really neat. That's something I've been slowly getting into as well, because I didn't realize how vast the gin world was. I always just thought, like, Bombay Sapphire. Sure. It was like my standard.
There's so
gin.
much more than that.
Yeah. So tell us, I know it's a whiskey podcast, but it's my new love of starting to get into gin. Tell us a little bit more about kind of the distilling process for that.
So it's very similar to any other distillation. You know, I mean, everything as far as the distillation goes, right? It all comes down to the ingredients, really. Okay. Other than that, you know, you still have to put it in a still. You still need it to ferment before that. You know, you need to boil the mash. You need to ferment it. Then you need to still it, collect that. You know, you collect the fumes of the boiling mash in a still. You know, that's the difference between beer and whiskey, right? Right. Beer stops at the fermentation. Whiskey takes that fermentation, puts it in a still. You know what I mean? So that's like, beer is basically whiskey, just whiskey has a lot more steps to it afterwards. Right. You know, and whiskey is moonshine, you know, because whiskey comes out clear just like every liquor does. You know, every single liquor that's distilled out there comes out clear, because it's virtually impossible to have colored fumes. Right. You know what I mean? Like, once you collect those fumes at the top of the still, if there's color to it, you either put a lot of something in it or you mess something up. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's really comes down to the ingredients that are in the liquor itself, you know, because other than that, distillation is distillation. So.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to talk about on the podcast too, because we talked about it prior. So this whiskey that we're drinking right now almost looks like a wine to me because of how light the color is. Sure. Do you want to tell the listeners what you told us prior to why it's so much lighter than the dark brown whiskeys we're used to looking at?
So when it comes to the coloring of whiskey, most people are kind of tricked by it, because in America, we don't have a lot of regulations on coloring whiskey. So to be colored, right, without any artificial caramelization or anything to it, it takes a very long time in a barrel to get there. You know, I was just telling you about that 35-year-old Scotch I have. Yeah. It doesn't look like any of these yet. You know, it has no dark color to it yet. I'd say it's probably like 2 shades darker than the Lagavulin we're drinking right now. You know, and that's because you can only get so much out of a barrel, right? Yeah. So, like, if they aren't switching that barrel out every year, you know, and it's just sitting in that same barrel, eventually it hits its max. You know, and they say about after 15 years, you don't get much more color out of it. You know, after 15 years, you got enough out of that barrel, you know, and at that point, it's just aging the fineness of the whiskey in it. You know, it's pulled everything it could have out of it. So for it to actually get really dark, it would have to sit in a barrel for a really long time and probably change barrels quite often. Because if not, you know, it's going to come out looking very, very light, because it's almost impossible to get it dark. Now, what I said earlier, though, was where there's an exception is if it gets put in a finishing cask. So, again, port, sherry, any wine cask, Cabernet, Pinot Noir, you know, there's so many different barrels that they can use for that. If it's something like that, that already has a very dark color to it, and the wood that's inside is stained with that red wine, you know, that red wine will infuse into the whiskey, And that in turn can make it darker a little bit faster, but it's also going to change the flavor profile to fit whatever was in that barrel beforehand.
Right.
So if you wanted to keep a traditional whiskey, you can't do that. You can't put it in an old X cask,
Yeah.
You could use a bourbon cask, you know what I mean? Actually, a lot of times in Scotland, they do that. One of their main suppliers of barrels is from America because, A, we're way bigger, right?
Right.
We have a lot more distilleries here. And we have a massive production specifically coming out of Kentucky.
Yeah.
And after a Kentucky distillery uses it, because for us it has to be new oak charred barrels, they can't reuse them, right? So they just sell barrels that are used for the buttload for cheap, Like they just are handing out barrels, you know what I mean? Like you can go buy Buffalo Trace barrels right now. You can probably buy 20 of them for like $200. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, they're just wood.
Yeah.
So they do that occasionally, but as long as it's only a new oak charred barrel and it's an ex-bourbon barrel, that's not going to bring much color to it. Right. That's going to be basically if they're just using their own thing. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that. Is that something that they do pretty often over there, is using bourbon barrels, or is that just something that they do for like shits and giggles, I guess?
A pretty common practice that they do.
Okay.
Yeah, that is something that's a big deal because, money's tight.
Yeah.
They got to save money where they can. Scotland's not huge. They're not going to go cut down every forest that's on
that's true.
on their land. You know what I mean? Just to make some barrels. Right. So, most distilleries and companies in today's world is very environmentally conscious, so if they can use it, they're going to use it. It's not like they're going to be hurt by that. Like they're helping save the environment.
Right.
And they're not just cutting down trees to make barrels and then toss them into the waste.
Right, yeah. Doesn't make much sense that way. No. Do they do many whiskeys in Scotland with the finishing barrels?
Yeah, absolutely. Almost every distillery does that nowadays. Oh, okay. It's just a unique way to create something different. They could take, for instance, if this was the regular Lagavulin 16 year, if they wanted to do something different, they could take the same exact thing, just put it in a finishing barrel, boom, you got something different. Because that barrel is going to make it taste way different than the normal thing. Now, if someone in Scotland's listening to this right now, they're probably calling me an idiot. I would never do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because especially with Lagavulin being an Islay Scotch, you don't mess with the peat. But Lefroy, for instance, is a great example of that. They have several multi-layer casks. They've got their quarter cask, they've got a sherry cask.
Okay.
Lefroy is definitely open to doing those things. And what I love is all of these distilleries are like 20 minutes away from each other.
Oh, no
way. Islay is a very small isle in Scotland.
Right.
It's not like you can be huge, right? It's an island there. So they're very close to each other. And I almost brought one of my other favorite whiskeys, but unfortunately for you guys, it's getting very low.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, I can't do that right now. But it's a distillery called Port Askeg, and it's actually the northern port in the Isle of Islay. It's the only way on and off of the island, right? Like as far as like ships go, like big ships, you could pull a boat up, like a small boat on the side of the island, right? But like if you actually need a port of entry, the Port Askeg is where you go. And it's a very small distillery that's in that like little town area there. And oh my God, they just absolutely kill it. Very small production. I've got 2 of their bottles,
Wow.
The one is 110 proof. Freaking burns, but burns like beauty. You know what I mean? Like wildfire down your throat. It's delicious. But maybe one of these days I'll bring you guys a little taste of it.
Yeah.
So do you go back over there and get these bottles, or how do you acquire these?
No, I haven't been over there since. But luckily for me, my family is actually mainly all European. Ironically, right now my parents are in Germany for the month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky. My entire life I've traveled over there a lot. The first time I was over there, I was 3 months old, and that's because they wanted me to get baptized in the same church that my dad did, my grandma did, my great grandma did. So I've traveled every country in Europe already, which is something I'm very thankful for. I've learned a lot from that, and I've experienced a lot from that, and it tries to make me realize that there's more than just like this little bubble that most people get stuck in. There's a huge world out there. So, right now they're going to be bringing me back a couple bottles. You know what I mean? I have hookups like that. And for a lot of my collection that I have was from when I was up in Pennsylvania. One of my regulars, he had his job was based in the United States, but his family lived in Australia. So he had a house here and he had a house in Australia, and he would come here for like 2 weeks and then he'd go back for a month, and then he'd come to PA for 2 weeks and back and forth and back and forth. You know, and Australia has a lot more supply there. You know, they get a lot more limited releases and stuff. One of the best bottles he ever brought me was Blaine's Gold Label, right? It's the one with the gold horse on top, which is an Australian limited edition bottle, right? You can start finding them here now more. But, you know, he would bring me stuff, right? He'd be like, he'd message me on Facebook like, hey, Anthony, like, what do you want me to bring you? And I would be like, hey, all right, grab me whatever you want, man. You know, because, like, he was an avid whiskey drinker, too. I was like, whatever you find that you think I need, just bring it to me. You know, so it's a little community that you create that's how you get to finding these interesting bottles, you know. And myself, like, unfortunately in North Carolina, it's not easy to get limited stuff, you know, like same with in Pennsylvania, and PA is a state-run state too. Yeah. But where Carlisle's at is a 30-minute drive to Maryland. Yep. You know, so I would just drive to Maryland, and there was this one little shop, shout out Little Whiskey Shop. That's what it was called. And it was in Maryland, just right past the border, basically. And I would just go there, and I would say every other time I went, they had something that was like, whoa. Like, I cannot believe you have this, you know? And it's because they're not a state-run state, and that owner just happens to have really good connections. You know, either that or he's a drug mule or something, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But I didn't care.
Whichever way you got what you needed.
I got what I needed, so I was okay with it, you know. So yeah, I would just collect off of random occurrences or coming by the bottles randomly. You know, I mean, it's taken me a while. You know, I didn't get to where I was at in my collection, which, like I said, is a little over 170 bottles. You know, I didn't get to that overnight. You know, I mean, it took a long time. That's cool. A fat amount of money already spent into that collection. Like I told you guys about these two bottles. It's like, damn. Yeah. You know, I regret some of that, but, you know, it's too late now. At least I get to enjoy the whiskey, you know? Exactly, yeah. You only live once. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. There you go. You get it. Exactly, yeah. And with those type of bottles, too, you get to kind of experience different parts of the world through, like what you said, like the history of it. So, like, if you really appreciate what you're buying, it's more than just a bottle of whiskey. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a history to it. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
So, my brain works in mysterious ways. Outside of, like, just your Islay with whiskeys and scotches, what would be your favorite American whiskey?
Yeah, so that's actually, I've got two of them. Okay. One of them I already kind of told you guys is one I'm trying to collect all of them of. It's High West: A Midwinter Night's Dram, which is based off of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, right? Absolutely love it. You know, being up from Pennsylvania when there's 2 feet of snow outside, that whiskey is what you want to drink. You know what I mean? I have a picture on my phone somewhere of the bottle sitting in a pile of snow, you know, with a glass sitting next to it full, you know, just to be like artsy about it, which, I don't know, probably a bad shot, you know, but why not? Absolutely delicious rye whiskey. You know, I mean, it's got so much flavor to it. It's very strong in the sense of like spiciness from the rye, you know, not the ethanol strong. So I absolutely love High West. Amazing distillery. And then my second favorite one, and it probably won't come to a surprise to a lot of people, but it's going to be Eagle Rare from Buffalo Trace. Yeah. Okay. You know, I mean, absolutely delicious bourbon for the price of the bottle. You know what I mean? I mean, it's aged 10 years. It's the same mash blend as Buffalo Trace, just aged longer in a different different location. You know, Eagle Rare is just, for the price that you pay and for what it is a delicious bourbon. So that would be my go-to sip. Yeah, that's great. So those are actually my two favorites as well too. Yeah, so I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. When, we didn't plan that, by the way. No. Yeah, when we had Chris Laco on, he's the one that brought us the bottle of High West.
The Boo Rye.
Yeah, the Boo Rye. And I didn't know it existed until he brought it on, and was blown away. And then I've been lucky enough to try a few other of their whiskeys that come out of there, and have been very impressed. And then, like you said, for what you get for the money for Eagle Rare, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. So,
did we drink Eagle Rare?
Yeah, ironically enough, we had it with Raylan, which is how that's how we met. We met. Yeah. So shout out to Raylan for this one.
I was sitting there thinking, I was like, I know I have a bottle of Eagle Rare sitting in my house, and I couldn't remember how I got to it. And I was like, did we drink it on the podcast or did I just get it for some reason? Because that's the hard part about having this podcast is we get to try so many new ones, and then we also have stuff at the house. And it's like, wait, do we try that with someone?
Mm-hmm.
Should I know more about this? But I agree. Eagle Rare is a good one.
Yeah.
I can't wait to find some place that has the Midsummer Night Dram.
Well, one of these days I'll just drop some off for you guys to try.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I mean, you got to do that. So, and if you're interested right now, the liquor store right down the street there, they're coming out with their lottery for it. So I would sign up for it real quick.
Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna have to
signed
do that.
up for our restaurant to get it. You know what I mean? Because it's one of those bottles that when it comes in, you got to get it. You know, because it'll sell in a week, or you'll drink it in a week if you buy it for yourself. You know. So
after this podcast, we're probably going to walk down there and sign up for it.
there you go. Yeah, I recommend that. So.
And actually, looking at these glasses too, so slightly off topic. These they're pronounced Glencairn, right?
Yep. Yeah, those are Glencairns.
So can you tell us why these are best for tasting whiskey?
Sure. Yeah. First off, to do that though, all of our glasses are empty, so I need to pour a little bit more for it.
Fair. ASMR.
So the first round was Lagavulin, the Islay single malt 12-year. And that is the most gorgeous bottle.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very American for our bottles to just be like words and no real styling.
Sure.
The Lagavulin bottle has a lot of, it looks just very classic.
Mm-hmm.
Visually to me, I would go straight to that bottle.
Yeah, absolutely. I forget who the artist is, but they do have a famous artist who does it for them.
Oh, wow.
I wish I could remember, but I don't. I remember reading it one time when I first got the bottle. Name completely slips my mind. You know what I mean? But if you look up all their special releases, every single one of them has a cool design. You know, this one's a falcon, but they have one that's like a big, colorful lion that's on the front of it.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, so they have an artist that does it for them, and I think it's a brilliant idea, you know? So, yeah, going back to why Glencairns are best for it is the shape of the glass, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was talking earlier about ethanol, right? So the point of this, right, is basically to be like a miniature red wine glass. You know?
Okay.
Like the red wine glasses are really important to open up the aromas, to kind of air it out, right? Yeah. For this, what's really important is so you can get your nose right up in that glass. You know, you're supposed to stick your nose all the way in. You want all that smell to hit you, right? You want it to come right up. And the shape of it is designed to, when you're swirling it and you go into smell, the ethanol gets caught on that shape down here where the aromas are allowed to come up first. You know, so you don't get that alcohol smell. You get the aromas of the ingredients in the mash first before that ethanol hits your nose. And that ethanol is what's going to burn it a little bit. And if I brought a little bit cheaper whiskey, one of my favorite Scotch whiskey sommeliers in Scotland, his recommendation first to drinking a good whiskey is to pour it in the glass and then flick it out. Right? Because you want to get the entire glass coated with it, but that first coat's going to be contaminated by whatever was on that clean glass. You know, so like I'm not going to do that with this black sheep, and I don't want to ruin your pours, right? But that's the first thing he says to do is to flick it out. And then I don't know if anyone's told you the proper way to actually taste whiskey.
I was going to ask
but there's 3 steps to it to really get the full flavor, right? So the first one, we're just going to take a small sip, and you're just going to let it go over your tongue. You're going to let it go back. So we'll do that right away. You can feel that smokiness.
Yep.
For me, ridiculously smooth.
Yeah.
Like no alcohol burn at all. It is all flavor for me.
Yeah, I was surprised with that one too, because you can find Ardbeg in pretty much any place, but this is very different.
Yeah. So Ardbeg 10 years almost anywhere. You know, I mean, you can find that one anywhere. That's their classic 10-year-old Scotch, right? When it comes to their limited edition stuff, it becomes a lot harder to find.
Yeah.
The guy I was telling you about in Australia, he actually is the gentleman who got this black sheep for me.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's no way I would have ever had it, right? So that's a very special bottle for me. Yeah, so the Ardbeg 10 year is just very kind of in your face, smoky. I personally love it. It's a campfire in your mouth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not everyone would enjoy that, but this one, because it's mellowed out, you know, it's their 20th anniversary edition. You know, they put a lot of love and care behind it. So that's what is a little bit more unique about this one. So, but the second step to tasting it is we're going to let it sit under our tongue, right? So you're going to let it kind of sit under your tongue. It's going to burn all the front palates under your tongue first.
Oh, for sure.
And then we'll swallow after that.
Okay.
Sorry for the awkward silence there.
Right. We can have some of that out.
Yeah. So now that that's burned, everything on your tongue, your palates are burned on the top there. Mm-hmm. I want you to do two things with this one, all right? So for the next sip, you're going to sip it like normal again, but I don't want you to breathe in through your nose when you're sipping because 90% of taste is smell, right? So the smell has a huge effect on how things taste. That's why, you know, when you walk into a kitchen and you smell something, you immediately think of something nostalgic. Like you think of your grandma's cooking, you know what I mean? Or that's why garnishes are more than just a pretty look on a cocktail. You know, especially herbs have a lot of aroma to it, you know, like a sage or a rosemary. You burn that a little bit and it will dramatically change the way that your mind perceives the flavor. Yeah. You know, so this next sip, do it without breathing in. It's gonna taste way better than that first sip. So we'll do that real quick. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Already way different than the first sip.
Completely different.
Yeah. Because everything's already coated in your mouth with it. Yeah. You know, all the palates, the fresh palates are burned off. You know what I mean? So it's completely gone. So that last sip that we just did there is straight flavor. It is all of the ingredients and the flavor that that distiller wanted you to have. Yeah. Right? Now for this next one, you got to make sure you're smelling with your nose at the same time as sipping. And I promise on my life, it will again taste way different than just that last sip we just took. So
oh yeah,
it's weird how it works.
Yeah, you get a lot more of that smokiness when you breathe.
You get a lot more of that smokiness when you breathe it in. Wow, which for me is beautiful. Yeah, to some people that would make it taste like dirty piss ash water. You know what I mean? But that's just the way it is. Taste is subjective. You know, one thing I love, you might hate. Yep. You know what I mean? Right. But one thing you love, I might hate. You know, that's just the way it goes. You can't be picky about it. So, but that's the correct way of actually drinking or trying whiskey off the bat. You know, again, I would have done the whole funny flick it thing, but I don't want to ruin anything in here, and I'm not going to waste good whiskey.
Yeah, I wouldn't waste that either. No.
So I did that. I just did a whiskey training class for some of our employees, you know, and I did that for them, and it was just funny. Everyone was like "What are you doing?" I was like, calm down. I'll tell you why. You know, like so it was funny. And I'm doing a class tomorrow morning for our table employees. I'm going to do the same thing for them, you know, because it's a process. You know, whiskey is very complicated. Our service director, the French guy, George, I told you about, he's our wine guy too. He's probably going to hate me when I say this, but whiskey is way more intricate than wine is. There's a lot more to it than wine has, you know, I mean, because there's so many more different things in the mash. You know, there's a lot more complicated processes that go into it.
Yeah, it's a lot more steps too, right?
There's a lot more steps to whiskey, you know, so I'm not saying it's older than wine.
Right.
It's probably not true. I mean, first off, no one can really date when whiskey first became a thing. Yeah. The very first time that it's ever written anywhere was in the 1400s. It was in the late 1400s, and it was in a like merchant bookkeeper's logbook, right? A guy who traveled with a trailer, and he claimed to be carrying a barrel of usquebede. And usquebede is Gaelic for water of life. And so that's what they called whiskey back then, right? So he was carrying a barrel of whiskey that he was going to sell, you know. And I absolutely love that. And I forget the date that it is, but there's also a document talking about royalty. And it was sometime in the 1400s again too, or maybe early 1500s. But it was talking about how mainland royalty, right? So kings and queens from the mainland of Europe would travel over to the islands to bathe in the water of usquebede, right? They would come over to get drunk as hell.
Right.
You know, like they'd come over for a good time because, you know, they were huge in the production there. You know, back then they weren't going to make this stuff and then put it on a ship, which would take a month to get over to the mainland. You know what I mean? It was way longer of a process where now obviously they throw it on a plane and it crosses that little channel in 30 minutes. You know what I mean? It was way different back then, you know, so it was a process for royalty to get over there, and really only royals could do that. They're the only ones who had the money to do that, you know? Unless if you hopped on a boat with a merchant or something like that. So it was really back then more of a a specialty thing. You know, it was meant for the higher class. You know, I mean, again, they called it uskebede. Like,
right, yeah.
You don't just call it water
exactly.
of life for no reason. You know what I mean? But that's another thing that I really love about specifically Ardbeg. They're really cool with this. They actually tie in their past as far as like mythology and Gaelic terms go. Very strong. You know, there's a whiskey called Trebon. There's one called Ugadale. And all of those, you know, the Ardbeg, Wee Beastie, they're all based off of like myths, you know, and the Trebon's history is about Gaelic god. There's a little pond, like lake area that has an ongoing whirlpool that just has been there forever. And it just is a random whirlpool. No one knows why. You know, I mean, I'm sure they do now, you know, with scientists and stuff. Yeah. But back then it was a myth in the Gaelic mythology that was a god. You know, that was him there. Like, and they based that bottle off of that, like, Gaelic myth. That's you know, cool. And I think that's so cool how they tie those, like, things into that. They took the water from that lake to make this whiskey. You know, so like when you're drinking that whiskey, it's like you're drinking with the god, right. You know, like, and it's just neat how distilleries will do that. You know, it just goes back to why, like, I would love to have my own thing one day, you know, so I could kind of tie in things like that as well. I mean, it's neat, you know.
I mean, when you open it, wherever your distillery is, we'd love to bring you back on and run it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. You know?
We'll probably bring you on back before then too. So
I would love to come back on. You know, I mean, I've got plenty enough to try, and I love to talk about it. You know, but before I open a distillery, I need to get about like $10 million. So yeah, because if I'm going to do it, I need to do it right. You know, and a good pot still costs you about $3 million. You know, so. Yeah, I mean, that's before buying a building, blueprints, buying the ingredients, I mean, it's an expensive process to go through to open a distillery. That's why I always give Matt credits, you know, especially to like End of Days down the street that, you know, I believe his name is Shane Faulkner. You know, I give him extremely mad credits for opening up a place. You know, I mean, the guy that I was talking about with Big Spring Spirits, his name is Kevin. You know, I mean, it takes a lot to open up a distillery, and you really got to be passionate about it, you know, because if not, there's no point in being in that industry, you know, because if you're just doing it for shits and giggles, you're not going to get far.
No.
You know, I'm sure there's a lot of times where it's a struggle, you know, and it's hard to get your name out there and the popularity out there. And again, I'm going to shout out End of Days. You know, they do an incredible job with their products. I am a huge lover of their gin. I mean, I'm a gin guy again.
Yeah.
Their Luna Bloom and their regular gin is just phenomenal. I actually have their gin and their Luna Bloom in a cocktail at Barrel downtown.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's an incredible liquor, you know?
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So if you were to open your own place, would you start out with gin just to get the revenue through the door, I guess you would say?
Yeah. So that's a huge thing with distilleries, right? Because I'm a firm believer to be a good whiskey, it needs time.
Yes.
You know, so you cannot open a distillery and age a 2-year-old whiskey and sell it. It's going to taste like shit.
Right.
You know, it's going to taste horrible. So there's two things that you can do, right? What most distilleries will do is they'll start producing vodka and gin, you know, or something that's easy to do that they can just produce it and then it's ready to get bottled because it doesn't need to be aged or anything, right? So that's one thing that a lot of places will do. The second thing that some places will do, which is not the most common, but a great example is Whistle Pig up in Vermont. They will start doing blended whiskeys. So basically they'll take whiskeys from other places and blend it themselves and they'll start selling that. So Whistle Pig is a great example of that because for the longest time, all of their product was from Canada.
Oh, no way.
So I'm not hating on it. You know, great stuff, man. I mean, I love their stuff. But one of their very first batches of their own was their piggyback, you know, their 6-year-old whiskey.
Yeah.
That was one of the very first things that they started to produce. Again, blending a whiskey is not easy, you know, so I'm not saying that's the cheap way of taking it out. Like, you got to have your own special blend of it, right? And that takes a lot of time of mixing things together. And does this taste good? You know, like one of my favorite things to do in restaurants is have an infinity bottle. And what that is basically it's for employee thing only because you can't legally sell this.
Right.
But like when the bottle gets down to only being like a tiny little bit left, like not even half an ounce left, instead of selling that, you pour this in the infinity bottle. And then around the bottle, you have like a blank sheet of paper that you write, I just put 0.5 ounces of this in it, and then the next thing, I just put this amount in that. And then you write everything down until you fill that bottle up, and then you drink some down, and then you keep going down and up. And what's cool about that is one pour might make it the best freaking whiskey you've ever had in your life. I've had that moment where I put something in it, and I was like, this is amazing. And then you put something else in it afterwards, and then you're like, wow. This is shit, this is the worst, so it's just funny to go about it like that because one thing can make it absolutely phenomenal and then the next thing can make it horrible, so to come up with a blended whiskey is actually very difficult and it takes a lot of time to create something unique, it's hard to just do it with 3 or 4 whiskeys. I mean, technically a blended whiskey only has to be 2 or more, right? Mm-hmm. But at this point, how many blended whiskeys there are out there, a lot of distilleries are doing 50 or more things in their blend, which makes it very complicated, but that's how they create their own unique thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So that's the 2 ways that distilleries can start making money like that. Because if you're strictly just going off of whiskey and you're doing it yourself,
right,
you're loaded. You know what I mean? You're okay not making any money for 5 or 6 years and you're okay spending hundreds of thousands of dollars until you do.
Right. Yeah, I don't know too many people like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I did, I no offense, I wouldn't be here. I'd be somewhere else with my own distillery at this point. So, yeah.
So you can blend pretty much anything together in order to call it a blended whiskey then, right? So if after you have a whiskey for 1 or 2 years, you can blend it with something for that's 6 years and it can still be considered a blended whiskey and you're okay with that? It's okay?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. So legally, as far as describing on the bottle of what it says, you can only put the youngest age on it, right? So a lot of blended whiskeys, especially in Scotland, there will be some that have a 20-year-old age whiskey in it, but it's only going to be a little bit, and then the majority of it's going to be a 1 or 2 year age whiskey.
Okay.
So legally, they can only say what the youngest one is. So they can't have a blended whiskey, and just because they put half a barrel in the blend, they can't say it's a 20-year-old Scotch, blended Scotch. They can only say it's a 2 or 3 year old Scotch, So that's where the kicker kind of comes in with it. But there's a lot of really good blended stuff out there. Yeah. Again, I was just saying with Whistlepig, I have no hate on that. You know what I mean? They are phenomenal. They're killing it. They just came out with their Roadstock rye a year ago. That's a huge deal. They kind of took that off the twist of Jefferson's Ocean. And that's the cool thing of the distilleries where in today's society, they got to come up with new ways to do things. The guy who owns Jefferson's distillery, brilliant. You know what I mean? Yeah. He bought a cargo ship and was I'm just going to fill it up with whiskey and I'm going to send it out into the ocean. What's cooler than that? You know what I mean? And Whistlepig, they filled up a tractor trailer full and, they're in Vermont. And I think it was the Daytona or something like that going on in California. I don't know what the race is. Don't hate. But, they drove it all the way from Vermont to California and then from California all the way back to Vermont, and then they bottled those whiskeys up, so it's just a cool way of aging it differently, because the whiskey's moving in the barrel, it gets different air surfaces, so it's just a different way of aging, which you kind of have to do nowadays, you got to keep changing to keep up.
I haven't tried this one yet, but I think it's really interesting. What they've done is the Blacked, where they have Metallica playing extremely loud.
Okay.
Where it's being barreled. And so the sound waves is what's making it kind of ripple and stuff. So I think that was pretty I've never tried it, so I don't know if it's any good or not. But it's just an interesting way of making the barrels move and the ripples in the whiskey. So something we'll need to put on the list.
One day.
Yeah, one day.
I'm I could knock out so many whiskeys in a year. Just we were at Rounds and they have the whiskey club. And I was oh yeah, I could go through this. And then I realized I'm but do I want to just hammer through it or just want to enjoy life?
Yeah.
And that's how I've taken my path through their whiskey club.
I may or may not have hammered through it. I started in October of 2021 and finished in January of 2022.
What's this club?
It's called the Whiskey Club at Rounds in Mayfair Town Center. We just had one of the owners on, and they have 3 different levels, the silver, gold, and platinum levels. Yeah. And you drink nearly 80?
So 80 or 90
different bottle. Ones. Yeah. Wow. And for me, it was great because I didn't really know much about whiskey. And I'm sure you know too, just by trying is how your palate opens up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was fantastic for me. I'd go in after work every day, just about, and try another one off of there. And that's kind of how the love of whiskey came about and how the podcast came.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely have to be able to try a bunch of different things. I mean, I was lucky with my first place, the Rebellion up in PA.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't nearly have as much as some places in town here have. We had about 200 to 250 on average. But I tried every single bottle I bought, You know what I mean? So that allowed me to try a lot of things. I have a lot of unique things in my own personal collection. I mean, I am jealous of Front Street Brewery. I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
Over 400 whiskeys there. Are you freaking kidding me? I mean, that collection is beautiful, but I know it took forever to get there.
Oh, yeah.
That's not something that you can just go to the liquor store and buy, because some of those bottles that are on their shelf is like, man, you've probably had that for like a year or 2 3 years, because like your average person is not going to know the rarity of that bottle.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that are up there that I'm just like, whoa. My girlfriend's like, calm down.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't.
Don't go crazy.
I'm freaking out here, babe.
Right. So we are coming up on an hour here, so we don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do have one last question for you.
Yeah.
If you were to tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
That's an interesting question. And I'm not going to say to change anything.
Yeah.
I would say to just stick true to who you are, because, I went through a lot of shit growing up, and, I screwed myself over in a lot of situations, and, I had as many good things happen to me as I have as many bad things. And, I wouldn't change a single thing, because you can't, you know what I mean? And I am who I am now, and I'm very happy with who I am and the path that I'm going on, and, the life that I have. Like, you got to be thankful for the little things. You know what I mean? Not everyone can have everything they want in their life, and that's okay. It would be superficial of me to say that. I need other things in my life. So I would really just say to my younger self, like, continue to do what you're doing. I really wouldn't change a thing. That no one can. Yeah. It's who you are.
Yeah.
But if my dad was talking to me, he'd say, save more money.
Right.
Like that. I guess I could say that. Like, don't be an idiot. You know what I mean? But so, yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So with looking at the past, looking towards the future, what do you hope to be doing in the next year to 3 years?
I really can't. I learned a while back that you can't really plan too far ahead in the future. What I can say is a dream of mine is I do want my own cocktail lounge eventually. I would love to open up a cocktail cigar lounge. Cigars are a huge thing in my life as well. I was going to bring you guys some, but I didn't know if you like cigars or not. So next time I will if you do.
Definitely, yeah.
But, I was very fortunate in 2019. I was able to go to Honduras, and I went to Rocky Patel's personal guest house. And, I saw the whole process from start to finish of how a cigar was made.
Oh, wow.
And when they say it's handmade, they don't just mean like some of it. The only 2 machines that I saw was a tractor on the farm, right? And then at the very end, there's a machine that they would use, 3 machines, I'll say that. Tractor, in the middle of, after they rolled the cigar, it was like a suction tester. So they would put the cigar in it to make sure that it was sealed, and it would like do a test on how tight that seal is, right? Because they don't want people putting their mouths on it.
Yeah.
So they just use this machine. And then the third one was saran wrapping everything. Right, like it would like put a plastic seal on it. Other than that, everything was done by hand, right? So I fell in love with cigars. One of my father's best friends owns a cigar lounge up in State College, so I'm really involved in that cigar world. So by the time I'm 30, because I'm 25, by the time I'm 30, I would love to own my own cigar whiskey lounge. That's my goal. Like, don't get me wrong. I love working for other people. I'm very blessed for the opportunities that I've had. You know what I mean? But I'm honest about it. I don't want to work for anyone else. I want to own my own thing. You know,
like, you're knowledgeable enough about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, I want my own business. You know what I mean? But that takes time. It takes money, obviously. You know, but that's my near future goal is eventually opening that up. And I do have a name, but I can't say it out loud on.
Yeah, you don't want to take it.
Yeah, I'm not going to put that out there.
Right.
So, but
have you been to Rocco's yet?
No.
I'll have to take you to Rocco's sometime.
Where's that?
It's off of Market Street. We'll get the calendars together and we'll go out there.
Is that by like all the car dealers? Okay, I've seen it. I've driven by it a bunch. Yeah.
It's across from Toyota.
Yeah, okay. I know exactly where you're talking about. I just, I've never been like, hey, let's go there.
Right, yeah. We'll get the calendars together and we'll go sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that.
Need someone to go there with me. Finding a better location than that, you'll do perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. If you could I don't want to be rude to any businesses downtown, but there's so many businesses that I'm like, you are wasting that building.
Yeah.
And like there's one that, again, I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to be rude, but it's like in a solo building, and it just looks old school. I mean, it is a beautiful building, but the restaurant in it sucks, and I'm like, you are wasting that space. I'm like, come on, like, there's so many gorgeous old buildings down here. That's what you need. Yeah. You know what I mean? You want people to feel like when they walk in your door, they're transported back in time. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you guys watch Peaky Blinders or anything like that, but like you want them to feel like they're in some Peaky Blinders shit. Like you want them to feel like they're getting an experience, man. And like that. I love the buildings that are here. Some of them are just gorgeous. So that's what you need.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So
yeah. Well, Chris and I are always looking at different businesses for sale and stuff too. So if we see something that we think that might fit the bill for you, we'll send it over.
Oh yeah,
your
definitely
way.
Do it. Yeah, most definitely. I would love that.
That's awesome. So. Yeah, we talk to a lot of people too, so maybe we can make your dream a reality. Love to partner.
Well, I would love that. Yeah, why not?
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for coming on and bringing on these wonderful scotches. I've never had anything like them before, so I greatly appreciate it. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on again. I've got plenty of them that I know you haven't tried before.
Right.
So,
and there's too much whiskey knowledge that you have that we bring onto this podcast, so we need to have you back on again.
Yeah, I was going to say we barely scratched the surface on that.
Exactly.
Again, it's so unique. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much. And take it away.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me. And I am looking forward to coming back. So,
do you have anything you want to plug? Like social medias, businesses?
No. So actually, I'm one of the few people. I have zero social media. I don't like it. You know what I mean? It just causes chaos in your mind and makes you think of other things. And, I don't have that. I don't really care for social media. But what I can say is, if you want to talk to me more and anyone that's listening wants to learn a bit, I'm always around at the restaurants. Again, I'm mainly at True Blue Butcher and Barrel downtown. We're a whiskey specializing bar, which is why they have me there mainly. Right. We have about 300 whiskeys and phenomenal food. So you can always catch me around there. So other than that, I wish I had something to tell you guys, but I'm not giving you my Snapchat. That's all I have. So that's just for me personally. So.
Yeah, I love it. So, and I hear Barrel has one of the best burgers in town too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just their Tuesday.
Yeah, were you really? Yeah. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. I probably saw you.
Probably there's a good chance.
But every Wednesday we do our $5 burger night. So if you really want to try it, come in and do that. We just came. That's the second one.
I put them up too.
We just came out with our whiskey flights there. So I have 8 different whiskey flights I put out, to actually be able to try a bunch of different whiskeys at once. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's a little bit underutilized in this town. I haven't found a place that really does that, so it's a great way to try a bunch of different whiskeys and also grab a really good burger for cheap, So, but I'm always there. So if you guys want to come in and chat more, specifically you two or anyone listening right now, please feel free because I love talking about it. I mean, it's my life. Whiskey is my life. So,
sold. I'll be there on Wednesday.
All right. See you Wednesday.
Yeah. Love it. That's awesome.
But yeah, thank you everybody for listening to this episode. The usual, leave us a nice review, like, comment, keep a lookout for any more giveaways that we might be doing just because we just like giving you guys free stuff.
Yeah. Lead up to the holidays. It's time to give.
There we go.
Sweet.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.